So, I just couldn't believe I heard that. It's going to fragilize the war after 20 years in office. He's going to be fragilized over this very small incursion. What do you think? I'm unfamiliar with the verb fragilized. I don't think that exists. This gentleman should go back to calling Chelsea versus Manchester football matches. He's out of touch with reality. He's simply repeating stupidity. All of this is propping up the rapidly crumbling picture of Ukraine in this entire war. Just dismiss this nonsense out of hand. Welcome back. As Colonel Douglas McGregor has often warned, the tides of war can shift dramatically, and today's events prove just that. We begin today's broadcast by turning our attention to a pivotal moment in the ongoing conflict. Ukraine's counteroffensive, once heralded as a game-changer, has met with crushing setbacks. What we are witnessing is more than just a tactical defeat. It is the collapse of an entire offensive, with losses reaching levels previously thought unimaginable. To give you a sense of scale, the numbers we're seeing today are beyond anything we've encountered in modern warfare. Yesterday alone, Ukrainian forces launched multiple large-scale attacks in the KK region and beyond. The sheer intensity of these battles and the consequences of Ukraine's overreach have resulted in one of the most significant military disasters of this conflict. Let's start by examining the staggering loss of military vehicles. The destruction of military vehicles in the past 48 hours is nothing short of catastrophic. Yesterday, Ukrainian forces lost 33 heavy combat vehicles, and it's essential to understand just how crucial these losses are. These vehicles, primarily IES, represent the core of Ukraine's mechanized units, providing both offensive and defensive capabilities on the battlefield. Without them, Ukrainian forces are left vulnerable to ground assaults and artillery strikes. The loss of 27 FES in the K region alone marks a critical blow to their ability to mount any meaningful counteroffensive. But let's not forget, just 2 days ago, Ukrainian forces saw 29 vehicles destroyed, pushing the total to nearly 60 vehicles in a mere 48 hours. To put this into perspective, losing 60 armored vehicles is equivalent to wiping out nearly 2 entire battalions' worth of mechanized infantry in less than 2 days. Such losses would cripple any military, but for Ukraine, which relies heavily on these mechanized units for their counterattacks, it's nothing short of a disaster. These aren't just any vehicles. These are IVs. IVs equipped with anti-tank missiles, 30mm cannons, and explosive reactive armor designed to protect against enemy fire. They are built to withstand heavy attacks, transport elite infantry, and hold strategic positions. Without them, Ukrainian forces are increasingly exposed, and their ability to maneuver on the battlefield is severely limited. And let's not forget the significance of Bradleys and BMPs. These vehicles, which represent some of the most advanced armor in Ukraine's arsenal, are being lost at an alarming rate. The destruction of these IVs with their heavy firepower and advanced armor leaves a gaping hole in Ukraine's frontline defenses. Now, imagine the logistical and strategic challenges Ukraine faces in replacing these vehicles. Given the complexity of modern armored vehicles, it's not as simple as swapping out one for another. These are multi-million-dollar machines, and their loss is felt not just on the battlefield, but in the command centers planning future offensives. Now let's shift our focus to the human toll, where the sheer scale of casualties has reached levels previously unseen in this conflict. The human cost of these battles is beyond comprehension. In just one day, 2,640 Ukrainian soldiers were killed or wounded, a staggering number that breaks all previous records for this conflict. This is not a mere statistic. This is the reality of a military force facing overwhelming opposition. To lose over 2,600 soldiers in a single day is to experience a military disaster on a scale that very few armies in history have ever faced. Let's put this into perspective. Just 2 weeks ago, Ukraine suffered 2,553 casualties in a single day, a number that already seemed impossible to exceed. Days later, that figure climbed to 2,565, further stretching the limits of what Ukraine's forces could endure. And now, with 2,640 casualties in just 24 hours, we are witnessing the highest recorded losses of the entire war. This is the third time in 2 weeks that a new all-time high has been reached for Ukrainian casualties. Each of these records represents not just a number, but entire battalions wiped out in a matter of hours. In the KK region alone, 300 Ukrainian soldiers were killed in brutal close-quarters fighting, their bodies scattered across the battlefield as Russian artillery rained down on their positions. The relentless bombardment has created a scene of utter devastation, where even the most hardened soldiers are struggling to hold their ground. And these numbers aren't isolated to one front. Across the entire front line, from Kursk to Zapia, Ukrainian forces are being decimated. The human toll is reaching a point where Ukraine may no longer have the manpower to sustain its current level of engagement. Every soldier lost is not just a life extinguished, but another blow to Ukraine's ability to resist Russian advances. What we're witnessing is the gradual breakdown of Ukraine's offensive capabilities. With every passing day, more soldiers fall, more vehicles are lost, and the gap between Ukraine's aspirations and its ability to achieve them widens. The question now is not just how many more soldiers Ukraine can lose, but how much longer they can keep fighting before their entire force collapses under the weight of these staggering losses. Losses, but as if the human toll were not enough, the losses in Zapar paint an equally grim picture of the devastation. Colonel Douglas McGregor has pointed out repeatedly that a breakdown in command and control often leads to heavy loss. Losses in Zapar are no exception. The devastation here continues to mount. Yesterday, Ukrainian forces lost an additional 7 tanks, 8 combat vehicles and 23 artillery pieces. The loss of 7 tanks alone is a significant blow to any army, but for Ukraine, these tanks represent the backbone of their armored offensive capabilities. Without them, the chances of Ukraine making any further advances in this region are quickly diminishing. Let's take a moment to fully grasp the significance of these losses. A tank isn't just another vehicle, it's a mobile fortress capable of delivering devastating firepower while withstanding enemy attacks. Losing 7 tanks in a single day severely undermines Ukraine's ability to hold or retake key positions in Zapar. Add to that the loss of 23 artillery pieces, which serve as the primary means of delivering long-range firepower, and you can see how Ukraine's ability to launch sustained attacks is being systematically dismantled. Artillery is the king of the battlefield, and without it, Ukraine's forces are left vulnerable to Russian advances. Losing this amount of heavy weaponry is akin to losing the very tools that enable Ukraine to maintain any sort of tactical presence in the region. But the real issue here isn't just the number of tanks or artillery pieces lost, it's the cumulative effect. Over the past week, Ukrainian forces have suffered one crippling defeat after another, with their mechanized units and artillery corps bearing the brunt of the losses. Every tank lost, every artillery piece destroyed, brings Ukraine one step closer to military exhaustion. Yet while the conflict continues to take its toll. The skies above have become the stage for Russia's unchallenged air superiority. Russia's air superiority is becoming a decisive factor in this conflict. Over the past week alone, Russian forces have launched 39 precision airstrikes targeting key elements of Ukraine's military infrastructure. These strikes have been devastatingly effective, hitting fuel depots, military airfields, and logistical supply lines, critical elements that Ukraine desperately needs to maintain its war effort. Perhaps even more significant is Russia's success in intercepting Ukrainian missile attacks. Over the past week, Russian air defenses have neutralized 9 ATACMS missiles, 30 Harmer glide bombs, and 25 HIMARS rockets. That's not even including the astonishing 433 UAVs, both reconnaissance and combat, that have been shot down. The destruction of nearly 500 UAVs in a matter of days is a crippling blow to Ukraine's intelligence gathering and precision strike capabilities. These UAVs are essential for coordinating artillery strikes and carrying out targeted assaults. Without them, Ukraine's ability to respond to Russian advances becomes severely limited. Russia's dominance in the skies is not just about destroying Ukrainian assets, it's about controlling the battlefield. With air superiority firmly in Russia's hands, Ukrainian forces are constantly on the defensive, struggling to find safe zones to regroup and resupply. And while the air war has tilted heavily in Russia's favor, ground war continues to deliver significant tactical gains for Russian forces. As Colonel Douglas McGregor has noted in his analyses, tactical setbacks in key regions often result in cascading failures on the ground. Ukraine is facing a series of tactical setbacks that are rapidly shifting the balance of power. In the Kherson region alone, Russian forces have successfully liberated 10 towns stretching from Ivanivka to Snihurivka. These are not minor victories. These towns represent critical strategic points that allow Russian forces to press deeper into Ukrainian-held territory. In the east, the situation is equally dire. Russian forces have secured the towns of Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, and Vuhledar, both of which hold significant strategic importance. These towns serve as gateways to deeper Ukrainian defenses, and their capture puts Russia in a position to launch further offensives against Ukraine's already stretched front lines. What's most troubling for Ukraine is the quality of the reinforcements they're able to deploy. Over 90% of the troops being sent to the front lines are new conscripts, many of whom lack the training and experience needed to face the hardened Russian forces. These are not elite troops, they are cannon fodder sent to hold the line as Ukraine's more experienced units are depleted. The loss of these towns, combined with the growing strain on Ukraine's manpower, signals a critical juncture in the conflict. Ukraine's ability to hold territory is rapidly diminishing, and with every defeat, their capacity to launch a meaningful counteroffensive slips further away. But while Ukraine struggles to hold the line, their logistical failures are exacerbating an already dire situation. Ukraine's logistical efforts have been pushed to the breaking point. Over the past week, Russian forces have targeted Ukraine's supply lines with devastating precision, cutting off key routes and destroying vital infrastructure. The loss of fuel depots, ammunition storage sites, and supply convoys has left Ukrainian forces scrambling to find the resources they need to continue the fight. Just yesterday, 49 Ukrainian soldiers were captured by Russian forces during a failed resupply mission. And while a prisoner exchange saw 49 soldiers returned on both sides, the reality on the ground is clear. Ukraine's logistical capabilities are collapsing under the weight of Russian pressure. Without the ability to effectively resupply their troops, Ukraine's forces are facing an uphill battle, not just against the Russian military, but against the logistical challenges that are preventing them from sustaining their offensive operations. Every supply truck lost, every fuel depot destroyed, brings Ukraine one step closer to running out of the resources it needs to continue this war. As we conclude this segment, we must acknowledge the devastating impact that these losses are having on Ukraine's ability to continue fighting. As Colonel Douglas McGregor has predicted, the war in Ukraine has reached a critical tipping point. With 2,640 soldiers lost in a single day and vehicle and equipment losses mounting to unprecedented levels, Ukraine's ability to continue its counteroffensive is in serious doubt. Russia's dominance both in the air and on the ground has shifted the dynamics of this war. Ukraine's hopes of turning the tide are rapidly fading, and with each passing day, their chances of a successful counteroffensive grow slimmer. For now, the battlefield remains in flux, but the numbers speak for themselves. Ukraine's losses are staggering, and without a significant change in strategy or support, their future in this conflict looks increasingly uncertain.